Welcome, everybody. We are here today talking with Garfield, one of the script writers that is new with Atrium. And we're taking these opportunities just to dive a little bit deeper into the purpose, the passions, and the creative mindset behind some of these creators that we're beginning to work with. Today, Garfield, super happy to have the opportunity to talk with you. And then just to get us started, I'd love for people just get a brief idea of who you are, your background, and a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be part of the team and to be working, to start working on projects and collaborations. My background is that I've been a filmmaker for, over 20 years, a writer, a producer, a director, but predominantly a writer and producer. Yeah, I mean, I went to film school many years ago in Connecticut to Wesleyan University, and since then, have loved telling stories, whether they're documentary or feature films, or I've worked on television series, both in fiction and nonfiction. And I really believe that storytelling is inherent in who we are as humans, and it's how we derive meaning in our lives, and it's how we form communities around stories. And so it's a very powerful, thing to do, and a meaningful thing to do in one's life. And so, that's what kind of inspires me, is to tell, I want to tell meaningful stories that are engaging and entertaining. And yeah, so that's kind of broad strokes. I currently live in New York City. I've lived in LA. I've lived in Toronto, Vancouver. Yeah, I don't know. What else can I share? What else would you like to know?
That's kind of a good place to just start in talking a little bit about the work that you do. How would
Sure.
you describe your creative process as a whole? How do you get started? Can you tell us a little bit around what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it really varies project to project. And it depends on if it's something that's like my original idea, something that I kind of came up with on my own, or it's an idea that someone's brought to me, something that's more fleshed out, or something that's, just from the beginning. So, but regardless of what it is, I think the most important thing is to really understand what is at the heart of that project. Why are we telling the story, or why do we want to tell the story? And sometimes that's not very easy thing to figure out. Sometimes that takes some time. Like if it's my own work, I might be really excited by an idea and not totally understand why I'm excited. So I'll spend a lot of time just writing and writing and writing, trying to get all of my ideas out and try to understand where the patterns are. What's the kernel at the heart of the story that I want to tell. And if I'm working with someone else, if someone brings me a project, or I step into a collaborative role on someone else's project, then it's still the same thing. I have to understand why the story is being told. What's the North Star of the story? What does the person who's bringing me the story want to convey? Why are they so excited about telling the story? And sometimes they don't know, and sometimes that requires a little bit of digging and exploration. But ultimately, that's, I think, the first thing that you really want to try and understand is like what's compelling to us. We kind of get on the same page of what's really the most compelling element to us about the story that we're going to be telling. And then you start from there and you build out, okay, well, if this is the North Star, if this is what I want to convey to my readers and to my audience, then how am I going to do that? And then you can start to like kind of conceptually figure out what's the best way, what tools to bring to the process of conveying that story, that purpose, that meaning.
That actually set me up perfect for the next question, where you talk about this idea of you could get lost there. And it makes me want to ask, how do you develop your ideas, right? You've tapped into, okay, I have this obsession. I have this thing that I'm developing. I know that this is where I'm going to focus my attention. Can you talk me through a little bit around how the idea becomes abstract to something a little bit more tangible?
Yeah, sure. So, I talked about having that North Star, that vision of what I want that experience to be for my audience, for my readers. What do I want to convey? Like, what's the deeper message, the meaning, the purpose of what I want to convey? And really like imagining that, and if as much as possible, putting that down on the page. Like, I want my audience to experience this. or like, I want my audience to have these experiences in this order so that they emerge. It's, like storytelling is an energy transfers business, right? We're transferring our consciousness, ideally through the page, through the screen, into our viewers' experience. And so understanding what you want that experience to be is, I think, again, like fundamental to the storytelling process. And once you've got generally a good grasp of what you want that to be, then I think you can say, okay, well, if this is the experience that I want my readers to have, because I obviously start on the page, how do I achieve that? Like, who is the character that's going to be the one that's going to be able to deliver that experience? What is the world that they're going to be living in that's going to help us, help us bring that experience out, elicit that experience? What are the challenges that they're going to face? What is the thing that they're most afraid of losing? What is the thing that they're most hopeful of achieving? And what are the obstacles that come at them? So really conceptually, once you have kind of done that intuitive work of really mining that, subconscious, whether it's of yourself or the people you're working with, to get a really clear sense of what the goal is, of what we want to achieve, what that North Star is, then it's like conceptually thinking about how we can use the tools at our disposal of storytelling. There's conflict, and you can launch a question for your audience that'll like draw them into the story, and then through that you can weave your plot and your narrative. There's other tools that you can use, and so it's taking that initial North Star and then conceptually figuring out what are the best tools to use to bring out that experience. That's the broad strokes of the process. And then, you get more and more granular as you go further in.
I think just hearing those little things, or like creating the lists of what's the worst possible thing that could happen to a character, right? And I chuckle a little bit as I hear it, but those details are what allow us to actually connect and really identify with the characters in these powerful stories.
Sure. Yeah.
You talked about the transference that happens when you create a great narrative. When you think about the list, when you think about the strategies, are there some other tips you can think of that would help someone who's trying to develop and tell a really powerful story? Is there a trait? Is there a general theme that you can use over multiple different stories that you found successful? What's a good starting point for someone who really wants to dive in a little bit deeper?
One tool that is a great tool that you can use is called by association, and it's really finding this is somewhat unrelated, but finding the paradox that's inherent in the story, and as much as and making that paradox as strong as it possibly can be. So, for example, one example that you often hear is like for the film Back to the Future. In Back to the Future, it's obviously it's a very entertaining film, but there's this paradox in the film where Michael J. Fox's character, his mother falls in love with him. His biological mother falls in love with him, and it's that relationship, like this paradoxical relationship, where how could you ever imagine a 16-year-old, falling in love with their biological son? Like that doesn't intrinsically make sense. And when you put that on the screen and you drive the narrative through that, it actually, makes that story more engaging. Yes, it's about time travel and all these things, but there's this like really paradoxical relationship at the heart of it that's kind of driving the narrative, and that's what causes Michael J. Fox to like have to figure out how to get his biological father to woo the mother, and the mother keeps being in love with him, and like that's what ultimately is driving the story when they're back in time. So finding these paradoxes and like using that to drive the story. Sometimes it's just like, who is the last character who would ever go on this journey? Figure out how you can and make that happen. Like Memento, the original Christopher Nolan film, is a great example of that. Like, who's going to be the last person to be a detective? Someone who literally has no short-term memory. And then you like, okay, that's the last person. Then you can drive a narrative through that. It's a great way to just it's like the engine for the story. So that's one. I mean, there's really
that's phenomenal. I think part of it too is hearing you talk through all these different tools that you have. speaks to the power of collaboration in the place that we are right now in terms of this
Sure.
creator economy and what's happening. Because when you, as someone with an idea, get to begin to work with someone like yourself that has this depth of skill and background on bringing an idea to its fullest potential, it allows other people to see creativity in this new way.
I do think that there is a lot of amazing opportunity. I mean, I'm super excited about the Web3 space, of course, because I'm here, and I think there's an immense amount of opportunity that's emerging from the space. I really, of course, believe that storytelling has to be at the heart of it, and that successful projects have to have a strong narrative. And that narrative, I mean, whether that narrative is like embedded in the character, like if you have NFTs and that narrative is embedded in the NFTs themselves, or if it's just the purpose of the project. Like the project itself can be the narrative, and you can apply the same stuff that we've been talking about here in terms of like stakes and what's at stake for our world if this project doesn't succeed. What's it, what problem is this project solving? What brings all these people together? Because yeah, that is a narrative, and people, I mean, people throw those terms around. I think what's the narrative of this, and kind of lightly, but they that is has to be at, I think, the core of any successful project. And when it comes to like kind of like formalized storytelling, yeah, there's a ton of opportunity, and I think that it does require, I mean, you can absolutely, lots of writers luck into it, and they tell really great stories, and it works out really well. I think, but I also think it's going to increase your chances if you're working with people who like know. And I'm not talking about myself, I'm just talking about in general, like people who have experience telling the stories and understand how the tools work. If you can work with those people, it's gonna increase your chances of like having a story that's gonna really engage an audience and bring people in.
I'm a little curious, like as you've had this experience and you kind of look back over the work that you've done, what ways do you feel like your previous work in terms of writing and producing, directing, etc., has kind of led you into this idea of what you're focused on today?
I would say that over time my work has become more high concept, and that is developing an understanding of how precious people's attention is, and how hard it is to keep it. And so stories that are kind of generally more high concept, I think, do a better job of that. As I was talking about before, like bi-associative stories that have these like internal paradox that you just from hearing the concept, you're like, oh, that's interesting. I want to learn that story. I want to watch that story. I want to watch that film. I want to read that screenplay. I think so. That's a big thing. So like, grabbing people right off the bat, being really aware of people's like attention span, especially now, right? Like we've moved into this real attention economy, and you're not just competing against other films or TV shows. You're competing against TikTok, and you're competing, against Twitter. And so, how do you maintain and captivate an audience in that space? Is a much more kind of challenging endeavor than maybe it was 20 years ago.
I know, like one of the general terms, and it's a little cringe, is like that early mentality. And I don't think Web3 is early so much anymore, but I think the opportunities to create high quality, like really incredible content, this is that early stage for that. That's what, when I think about like the different evolutions of where we are, this is that part where if you want to focus on bringing something incredible to life, it's more tangible than I've ever felt before. And that's exciting for a lot of people. Like it really is. Listen, I've had a great time talking with you so far today. I gotta say, one of the things that I wanted to just close out a little bit on is, is there anything you want the Atrium followers, people to kind of know a little about who you are and what's going on with your projects, your life? Anything you want to share at this point?
Web3 is the future. I think that there is I'm very much drawn to I'm an idealist, romantic idealist on some level. And I believe in the promise of like trustless systems and decentralization. And I'm working on a project for the nouns community, which is taking the nouns and building a feature film. For now, it's a treatment. Hopefully, it'll move into like a script for them. And I love that project because they are so kind of embedded with the sense of decentralization, and everything is on chain. It's CC0. It's all about building community, and I love that ethos. So yeah, I'm excited about that, and in Web3 in general for those reasons. I've been One of the projects I'm working on is all about like epistemology, how a truth emerges, what truth is to a society, and what it means to community. And as I was reading a book about this, what I realized is like truth comes out of consensus. And this was actually was written in the book, and like it's like the consensus of the academia is how truth is defined, or the consensus of like the world of like journalism is how truth is defined socially. And what I realized is that consensus is at the heart of what Web3 is all about. It's a form of truth that is trustless and is objective, and I love that about Web3. So I think again, it's just I'm kind of rambling a bit, but I'm just very excited about the space and and what the space means to the world, and I'm want to be at the heart of that and the forefront of making it happen in terms of storytelling.
I really appreciate you kind of taking your time and share a little about who you are and the vulnerabilities of your work and the process that you have. Every time I get to have an opportunity to talk with a creator, I feel like I get to be super selfish because I just get to walk away. I'm like, I learned a whole bunch about the creative process. I learned a whole bunch of things that I can apply to my own life. So thank you so much for kind of taking some time this morning. I will say, like, any questions on your mind? Like, I don't want to just like pepper you with questions. Anything that kind of stood out? Anything else that you wanted to touch on today? By all means, I definitely give you the stage for anything else you wanted to share before we kind of sign off.
No, I mean, I think I really enjoyed the conversation. It was a real pleasure. So I just appreciate you taking the time to speak with me, and look forward to seeing where this all goes. I'm excited.
Same. All right. Thank you so much, Garfield. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and everyone can tune in for future artist and creator chats here at Atrium.